What's up?
Casey.
It's the Poor Sports Podcast. Once again, I typically have a co-host named Alex, but people have grown accustomed to him not showing up to these podcasts anyway. So I planned one with you, Josh Hermsmeyer, like one of the OGs. I think one of the goats. I was trying to figure out which superlatives to assign to you of football analytics. And you get them all for me because you're like the only football analytics guy that's ever also seen me do stand-up comedy. So for me, you're the greatest of all time.
Saw you and bought the shirt.
You saw me and bought the shirt. Saw me maybe multiple times or just once. Opening for Bobcat Goldthwait, was that the time?
That's when I saw you. Yep.
Okay, yeah, and then and you own some merch shirts. Mine not on today. I'll point that out. You have this Chargers stuff and some analytics stuff on, but whatever. You have a friend that works for the Chargers, a friend that does comedy. We could share this screen if the person on that side of the screen was willing, but apparently he's not. Anyways, no, it's and so you're the creator of Air Yards, is that correct, or at least the popularizer of Air Yards?
Did not create it. No, it's a stat. No one can take credit for the birth of it. I guess if anyone could, it would be like Brian Burke. He's kind of the godfather, first person to write about it. I think what I did is I popularized it for wide receivers.
You're the Steve Jobs of Air Yards for wide receivers.
Wow.
Yeah, and so you also are the founder of airyards.com, or is that part of the bio correct at least?
Yeah, it's still up and running. I still got to update it after week one, but it's still going. Air Yards, and then airyards.substack.com if you want to get any of my writing now. I am former.
Is that Airmail?
Yeah, it's called Airmail, but
the
actual address is airyards.substack.com. So like all the other former 538ers, Nate Silver, Neil, we're all on Substack now. We're all refugees.
Yeah, it did. Oh, well, we don't need to get into all that, but 538 did take a turn. And I'm happy to see you still doing it. I know that's like, it's, I remember before I had kids, I wrote about analytics some, but I would read some of the great analytics writers for baseball, and they would quit. They'd be like, I have kids, I can't focus on this. And I'd be like, how could you not devote your time to this thing? You're so good at this thing. And then I'm like, oh, I understand. Like completely, like not, I haven't even considered writing something about analytics. And I mean, well, how old's my daughter? 5, like at least 5 years, probably longer, probably since my wife was pregnant with her. So I applaud you for like continuing to fight the good fight in sports. You got to be in your late 60s or something like that.
Oh, what a dick. Yeah, 47, and my kids, or at least one of them, is out the house. He's off to California, so he's my meat puppet now for my fantasy bets. So that's pretty cool. And then my youngest, my daughter, she is a sophomore at Gonzaga Prep here. So yeah.
Oh, nice. That's awesome. And you're out in Idaho, still, is that right?
That's correct. Idaho? Yeah. So in the Panhandle there, we're like half hour from 2 states in Canada. So yeah.
That's the two greatest states, Washington and Montana. Which do you spend more time in, Washington or Montana?
Washington, definitely.
Okay.
Yep. And because that's where my daughter goes to school. So
yeah, that's fair. Does she? Oh, this is like maybe too much information about your family to be putting out on these internet airwaves. But like, do you commute her to there every day, or is it like?
Yeah, actually, this is interesting. So kind of goes to Zig when Isaac. I'm not a fan of Elon Musk. I'm not a fan of what's happened to Twitter and X. And I never wanted a Tesla either. But that commute is such a bear that it made sense. And the other part of it was like Hertz like flooded the market with all these things. So you can even a non-previous rental Tesla now you can get for really cheap. So it just penciled out. I mean, we were instantly in the black compared to the amount of gas we were paying to take her to and from school. It's about, hour each way. So I don't know. It is quite a commute, but the schools here in Idaho are not well regarded.
All right.
So getting her into Gonzaga is a good deal for us still.
It's also nice about those Teslas is you could just get still be drunk in the morning and it'll just drive you there, right? I think that's what I've always heard.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I hopefully that's not true because she's going to be driving it on her own here in a couple of months.
Well, I've always said about those because that's the big reason that I hear people say like, "Oh, you don't want people taking, you don't want people having driverless cars or self-driving cars because they'll just drive drunk." And I'm like, I think they're doing that already. I don't think we're stopping people from
No.
driving drunk just because there's danger involved. So yeah, I would rather have a computer take over. And then there's plenty of people in my life who I think a computer would drive better than them, to be honest with you. One of our guys.
My daughter is one of them. But here's the thing: it even tells you like what the person driving is listening to, how fast they're going. I can set an alarm so like if she hits over a max speed.
Oh.
So it's like a surveillance mobile, and another reason why I never wanted one. But now it's kind of hey, it's kind of worth.
It's got cameras everywhere. That's the one thing I will say. The cameras everywhere is weird. It's weird and it's also beneficial. I've thought about this a lot. We're like trying to figure out 2 kids and a dog is like our vehicles are maxed out basically. And we're like, do we buy something else? We don't want to drive 2 vehicles everywhere. And then you're like, I mean, at this point, it's like, what do we get? I know it's 4 people and that's like everyone's got 4 people in their family, whatever. But I'm like, do we get like a passenger van? I can't drive a minivan. I can't do that. But then I'm like, well, shit, there's just going to be these huge windows. People are going to break in. But if you had the Tesla, like 18 cameras around the vehicle, I could get at least a little bit of identifying information about a person that broke in. And those things like warn you if you're breaking into them, right? They're like, don't do this. You're going to jail or something like that.
I don't know if it talks to the asshole who's trying to break in, but it definitely records it all, and insurance loves it. So
yeah. Have you had any problems with it?
no, we're blessed with a garage, so we get that thing parked.
Oh yeah, you must have it because you gotta keep that thing charged.
Got to keep it charged and out of the snow. Yeah, for sure. One thing though is that people think you can't be a snow driver, and that's wrong. It actually.
Oh, I bet it's better. I bet it's way better because it probably actually is doing calculations faster and less emotionally than you're doing while you're driving.
Yeah, no, and it's the same thing. It's almost impossible to get that thing to go squirrely, just
Right.
because each tire actually has its own kind of sensor and adjusts to the road as you accelerate. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, no. Now that you say all this, I think I'm willing to put up with all the bigotry on X just for these self-driving cars. No, okay. So we should move on past this before we get. I got nothing to lose, but you could, we could really go down a path that they take air yards away from you and they make you live in Idaho without letting your child travel somewhere else for school. So I want to talk about the Seahawks predominantly. And I heard you talk on another podcast about this, but luckily my rate of retention when I listen to something is pretty low. So this will still be new to me. There's like the last, I don't know, I guess like the last 6-7 years, the last couple of years of Russell Wilson in Seattle, the first couple of years of Geno Smith, there's this groundswell of people who use analytics to like define the quality of the quarterback in Seattle, which is great. Overall, I think is great. But then what we've seen is like Russell Wilson leaves Seattle. Oh, I actually want to say this while it's on screen. Robert Springer is one of our big listeners, our favorite listeners, and he said, you got to wear the merch. Can't wait for this episode. So he's there's support for the merch out there. Maybe next time. If you haven't, it's probably, honestly, frankly, it's probably being used to clean the Tesla on the weekends. This shirt. There's no way this shirt.
No, it's a cat bed. Yeah.
Okay. Is it? Do you have one of the cat shirts? Was that the shirt that you own?
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay. All right. I'll mail you some new merch. I still have to. I got to go track down an Air Yards shirt. I love the Air Yards shirts. Anyways, so Geno Smith and Russell Wilson have both been like to a degree analytics darlings. I said Russell Wilson, right? Russell Wilson. The Let Russ Cook movement was based on this idea that he was such an efficient passer that he should be passing more. And even the increase in volume shouldn't reduce his efficiency enough to make that a bad idea, right? And then he has like mostly good years in Seattle. Maybe the last year was like a little bit of a drop off compared to previous years, and then goes to Denver. And he goes there as a guy who's like, I would say a 95% probability Hall of Famer with that career trajectory, to a guy who's like maybe will never even sniff the Hall of Fame, may not receive enough votes to be on 2 ballots, And My question is, the first question is, was Russell Wilson ever good?
I actually asked that same question to some people on a pod because I was uncertain. But where I come down is, yeah, he was good. He was good for quite a while, and I think when he lost his mobility, he lost something really important in his game. And I'm not saying he's immobile now. I just mean that he actually had something special. He was able to get away from pressure, and that made him so good on third down, right? Whether he was scrambling to throw or scrambling to get the first down with his legs, he was just elite on third down in many, many years. And so, hey, Sneaky Pete built the entire plane out of that. So you just, run, pass, and it seemed to work for so long. And, until the game's on the line in the Super Bowl, and then it's passed. But I think the problem with Russ was
Wait, hang on a second. I don't want to move past that because you're one of the few guys that might be on my side of this. Okay. I think even maybe it was the 538 article that I don't remember if it was 538 or not, but I thought there was a pretty good analytics argument that passing there was the right decision. Obviously, the outcome is terrible. There's no arguing with the results. Do you fall on they should have run the ball there? Is that the side you fall on?
No, I think there's a good argument to be made either way. I think someone else was saying that there was another chance at another play. That's why you pass. Mm-hmm. I think that's the argument for the pass. And then it just the nickel cornerback jumped the ball, and they seemed to have good scouting. They knew what the hell was going on. Well coached defense, Bill Belichick, who knew? And I think my issue is just that at the goal line in general, right? The most productive and what the EPA per play says and what the analytics say, quote unquote, is that running is the best option there. So I can make an argument either way. Marshawn was still pretty much peak beast mode at that point. It certainly was the team identity. So to lose the way they lost, I think, even today, like I think I heard on the Beast Mode podcast or the Beast Pod, whatever it's called, Marshawn talking about it just this past year. And he was saying, yeah, man, nothing was ever the same. And Pete Carroll was on the pod. He was like saying it to his face, nothing was ever the same in the locker room after that. So those soft, there's the, here's what the numbers say, and then there's this, well, you have to face these guys afterwards.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And it's like, and I think that was kind of the beginning of the end of Russ having a lot of buy-in from the locker room.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if I don't think Pete Carroll could have possibly foreseen the extent of the fallout from that. Like I think if it's possible, like if Lynch gets the ball and he fumbles, or if they score too fast and the Patriots have a chance to, that was part of the deal. There was I think enough time on the clock that the Patriots could have a chance. And also you wanted to have, if you ran another play, not only could you run an extra play, but also the next play, if you threw an incomplete pass, it was not an obvious pass down. You could still run on third down and run on fourth down potentially. However you feel about that, I definitely am on the side of it was probably 52%, 48% pass was the right decision. And
wasn't there an issue with the timeouts? It's been a while since I've looked at this particular play.
Yeah, I think
were they out of timeouts? Wasn't that?
I think they had one timeout left, and so if you run the ball there and don't score, you have to call the timeout. And then there was 25 seconds left, so you're pass for the next two downs was the argument. And if you pass the ball, it's incomplete, and then you run the ball. Or you can come out, run and or pass because you have the timeout to fall back on. That was at least the logic behind it. And then there was also a stat that was that year, one interception got thrown from the 1 yard line in all of the NFL, and it was that pass that it was 75 touchdown passes from the 1 yard line, and the one that was an interception was that play. But I mean, none of that stuff is that actually, those kind of stats can be a little misleading, obviously, because there could be interceptions from the 2 yard line and the 3 yard line that are informative of what you should be doing there anyway. But either way, I think that they the culture damage, there's no way he could have foreseen it being that severe, but it certainly was a result of that. I've listened to all those podcasts since then too, and it's been pretty interesting to hear Richard Sherman, who's my favorite Seahawk ever, and Marshawn Lynch, and they all say, and with Pete Carroll to his face, they say, like, this is what ruined that team. And then to a man, they also all say, we would have won 3 or 4 if we didn't do that. Like, and that's probably also not accurate. But anyway, I guess, like, to move on to the Russell stuff.
Yeah. I'll answer your question, I guess. I think he was, as you say, on a Hall of Fame trajectory. And I think that he would have made it there if he'd stayed in a system that took best advantage of his declining skill set. And instead, he came into into Denver as a conquering hero. He's finally having sex, and like it was a big day for Russ, and like he was feeling himself, and he started that charity, or at least he brought the charity with him, and then you find out that might have been shady as fuck, and like so there was a lot of stuff going on, a lot of other stuff going on, and I think that along with just having one of the most incompetent coaching staffs ever to grace the NFL game, really kind of hurt him, at least on the offensive side. Evero's actually pretty good. But anyway, yeah, so it didn't work out. Now he's in Pittsburgh, and I don't know, is he going to get Wally Pipp there? I guess he's not really a Wally Pipp here. He's just going to get Jack for Fields. But
what he's going to get is Matt Flynn to a degree.
Flynn, there you go.
He Matt Flynn to Matt Flynn. Yeah, that's kind of I think everyone looked at so Nathaniel Hackett, obviously, it seemed like he was brought in there with the idea that they were going to bring in Rodgers. And then Russ goes in as the second choice, but like kind of it was a weird like blend of they were selling out for Aaron Rodgers, and then Russ went in there with so much leverage, it felt like, because they missed out on Rodgers. And so they had to roll out the red carpet. They had to do all this, give him all this VIP treatment. There's a guy up here, you might have heard of him. Jake Heaps was like ultra college prospect, 5-star prospect, eschews the Huskies, doesn't go play for the Huskies. He's Mormon, so he goes and plays for BYU, and then never does anything at BYU, bounces around a couple schools. He's on local radio. He spends like a training camp with Seattle. I have never seen a person turn a 5-star high school rating into more than Jake Heaps has, including being in Denver, Russell Wilson's personal quarterback coach. I've never even heard of that guy being in the facility. In fact, the only guy like personal quarterback, whatever, that I've heard of being in the facility is just the Alex Guerrero guy that was in New England with Tom Brady. And that was like also the subject of a bunch of controversy. And yeah, that's what it felt like to me. It was like it's like we had it's like they had everything planned for Aaron Rodgers, and they're like, shit, we got to do something with all this like power. So we'll hand it to Russell Wilson. And then when Nathaniel Hackett gets fired, as he should have been, Sean Payton, everyone was like, well, they're gonna turn him into Drew Brees because he's short. Can you tell me? Because I kind of. Russ was frustrating here not getting rid of the ball is obviously like a very frustrating thing that he has done. And he was able to escape a lot of pass rush because of his mobility that you talked about earlier, him not having. What are all the ways that he's different from Drew Brees? Which I'm not like trying. I mean, I don't want to spend the entire rest of the podcast on it, but like what, besides them both being short, Brees had a little bit of mobility early in his career, but not in his Sean Payton era. What are all the ways that he's different as like a processor and all that stuff?
My goodness. Yeah, no, Brees was insanely accurate. And it wasn't just like, can he put the ball on him? He would put it in a place that allowed the guy to, get yak. And he was also completely mastered the system that Sean Payton gave him. And I think, when it comes to Russ, I don't know that it was that often, even later in his career, let Russ cook lasted what? 8 games until they decided, no, we're not going to do this anymore. And I think they let Brees cook for 13 seasons. It was like,
sure,
it was his offense. And I don't know. I was in Indianapolis, and just to kind of go to that, just how much it was Brees. I was in Indianapolis for a combine. I think it was 2019, and getting hammered at a bar, and with some, I think Alvin Silva was there or whatever. And in comes Sean Payton, and we start buying him drinks, and he's pretty house, and he yells we started asking him about Kamara. I don't know why, and he said, Kamara's soft. and like our jaws are on the floor. We're like, soft, but basically it was Bree's show. There was never any question that it was like Kamara or any running back was the most important piece in his offense. And it's funny, you mentioned that they were expecting Russ to be the next Breeze. Well, and then they got Nix, and now everyone's saying he's going to be the next Breeze. And I think we just need to calm down. Obviously, stop with those comps. It's more likely than not that no one's going to be the next Breeze. And after this first week, I think we saw the Nix isn't going to be the game manager that we maybe hoped, or that the people in Denver hoped he would be. Maybe all the kind of concern over his arm and throwing to the deep and intermediate parts of the field is well founded. He certainly looks sharp short, but you saw what Mike McDonald does. He can put a young QB in a blender, and when he knows that he's going to be passing short, my God, those guys were ready for those short passes, blowing those dudes up. So.
Yeah, I thought that because he's one of the perfect examples of how misleading college stats can be, right? He's like maybe higher than 80% completion percentage, or like close to 80% completion percentage, and like not and I mean, Oregon threw the ball down the field a little bit, but he was, you could see little things in the NFL, like a bunch of those passes short even, and he's, under duress and whatever, they were like behind receivers and behind him too far, or behind him to the point that they become, there's no yak at all after and there's just like it was interesting to watch. He also threw the ball 42 times, which was like Peyton Breeze like, where it's like, we're just going to throw a bunch of 3-yard completions over and over and over and over again. It did feel a little bit like Peyton to some degree is prepping him to be Breeze, but you still look at that roster and you look at how fucked up the cap situation is, and you're like, this is like, this guy has to work out, and he has to work out well, because they still are probably 2 years away from digging themselves out and being able to acquire another meaningful quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, well, you have to draft another one this year, I think.
Sure.
But always be drafting quarterbacks. That's my mantra. But of course, the people, the media in Denver will say, "Oh no, that'll shatter his confidence. You can't do that." It's the funniest shit. Like, every other position on a football team has to compete for snaps. But oh no, we're going to shake the poor quarterback's confidence if we actually make him compete with someone. So I think that's nonsense. The canonical example is, of course, Steve Walsh and Troy Aikman. They were drafted basically with number 1 picks in the same year almost, and they made them both play. And when they figured out that they wanted to go with Aikman, they traded Walsh, and they got even more pieces, and those pieces helped them to their Super Bowl run. So I don't know that you get that much now for your cast off, unless you play it correctly and play it close to the vest. Don't let everyone know that you hate him. Just say, "Oh, we're having a tough time. We can't choose. We're gonna choose this guy, so you can have him." I don't know. I guess my problem right now with Denver is that the expectation for Sean Payton is that he was going to come in and fix everything, and as you say, he's probably another 2 years out.
The Geno Smith era started like no fanfare. He did what? He came in and replaced Russ for a couple games when Russ was injured. Like, I think the one game missing injury that Russ had in his career. And he had like stretches of good and stretches of bad, like you'd expect from any veteran backup quarterback. And then he comes out 2 years ago and is like pretty good and and actually I'm going to have you qualify pretty good, because I don't think you're as big of a Geno fan. In a similar way, that, and maybe it's just what I see because I'm a Seahawks fan, there's a lot of like these like scatter plots of quarterbacks and accuracy, and like always the ones that I see are the ones where Geno is some in elite quadrant of that graph, and so it could be a bias of the people that I follow and the people, however the algorithm's pushing stuff to me. But Geno has been definitely better than anyone expected him to be. Whether he's good or bad, I think he's like a top 20 quarterback. Being a top 20 quarterback is not what anyone expected Geno Smith to be when he took over for Russ. Everyone was disappointed. mean, I think most people, obviously Gino's family probably pretty thrilled. Uh, the most people wanted to see like Jimmy Garoppolo, or I can't even remember who all the like, I don't even think we got Derek Carr hype here. There was, but anyways, they wanted anybody but Gino. Gino is this known quantity. Nobody thinks is good. And then I come to find out, I'm listening to these podcasts. Josh Hermsmeyer also thinks Gino's no good, despite all of these scatter plots I'm seeing that say he's an elite, accurate passer downfield. What gives?
Well, my take is mainly based on my priors. No, so
Sure.
first of all, I was super happy when he came on the scene, and he said they wrote me off. I didn't write back. I thought that was baller.
Yeah.
I loved seeing him succeed, especially after what you guys got in return for Russ. I mean, you just absolutely stole from the Broncos, stole their soul, stole their future, and if it for my money, I would have liked to see your GM actually make some quarterback picks with those, but it hasn't. And I think Gino right now, the way I describe him is he's a good bridge quarterback for McDonald. He's not going to get you fired your first couple years as you figure out what the next play is, what the next guy is, because that's what he's going to need. And one of the things I was worried about for Mike this year was that there was this expectation that the Seahawks offense was actually going to be pretty good. And I was like, I mean, last year Gino really came down to earth hard, and to give you kind of a feel for the vibe within the people who I run with in analytics, we've all been kind of skeptical of, and I'm including like even Ben Baldwin, who's a huge Seahawks fan. We've all been skeptical of Gino, and the people who been really pushing him up are people like Steven Ruiz at the Ringer or whatever, who have him like a top 10 quarterback all the time, and he took victory laps the first year, and then the second year he was dog shit, and he never moved his ranking. And so we've just kind of been like watching and laughing, and because a lot of that is just vibes and tape based, and it really kind of shows you that no one really has the answers at quarterback. It's this impossible position to really predict. And so I guess my take right now is that it was the best situation McDonald could have gone into as a new head coach. Gino is going to be serviceable, and McDonald is going to put together a great defense. You know that. You guys definitely have talent, on the outside. You've got talent wide receiver. I don't know how banged up your running back is, but I read something that he might have. Was it a chest injury? I can't remember. But something after the game yesterday, that I heard that he had been hurt. But hopefully that's not the case. Hopefully Kenneth is going to be solid moving forward. But I think they need to go back to that pound the run game, unfortunately, because at the beginning of that game, Gino didn't look very sharp, and then when Murray started getting going, that's when you guys started to kind of calm down. And I guess giving up a couple safeties wasn't very good either. But
sure, yeah, and you wonder what those first half numbers would look like. I mean, those safeties are like, obviously they're some product of randomness, having two possessions start on like the 1 or 2 yard line, and then have like the holding play is colossal fuck up, but it's holding plays happen on every play. The fact that it got called, it was pretty egregious hold. I'm not saying it shouldn't have been called, but I'm not putting that stuff on Gino, and those obviously take like snaps away. I think they had like 24 offensive plays in the first half or something like that.
Yeah, I was thinking more of the first drive. It just and look, it's week one. It's week one.
And by the first drive, are you talking like, because the first drive was very short. It was the sack, exactly. And then that was bad. I even he gets hit on that throw, and I don't know that I think that it certainly changed the trajectory as much as it has to, because it's contact at the point that he's throwing. I don't know that he was throwing to a place that wouldn't have led to that interception. Based on, I've watched it a couple times, and like that felt like it was an interception to a pretty obvious defender.
Yeah, and it seemed like it was the worst start possible
for
McDonald, and I root for him. By the way, he's former Baltimore Raven, obviously, and he's best friends with a guy I know in the league, and so I've got to meet him and meet his family. He's a really cool guy. Like, seriously, you guys got a real one. You got a super cool head coach. And so I'm rooting super hard for him, and it just seemed like it started in the worst possible way, and that just kind of feels like what you're going to get with Geno sometimes. And but again, I want to preface this with like the entire league sucked week one. Like there was just I think Tua and maybe Mahomes had good games, and so I mean I think they're behind. Offenses are behind defense right now, and I think that maybe we're being a little hard on. I'm being a little hard on Geno, but came out with the win. I actually haven't finished the entire Seahawks game. I'm about 3/4 of the way through my watch, and so I'll probably have more strong takes after I complete the whole thing.
So Geno Smith's been a little bit of a like a case study in a different way. In fact, frankly, the Seahawks since Pete Carroll took over have handled the quarterback position differently than just about any team in football. There's like, first off, they trade for like Charlie Whitehurst, Tavares Jackson. I think they played a year of Hasselbeck under Pete, maybe. I think that's right. But and then they signed Matt Flynn, and then despite signing Matt Flynn, they draft Russell Wilson relatively high, and then they give a third rounder the starting job out of camp. And then, they did give Russ a couple extensions. And then now they're back to this point where it's like Geno Smith is on this kind of like medium-sized contract, and they trade for Sam Howell in the offseason. And they seem to kind of be back to that, like cycling through value quarterbacks, trying to find an opportunity to have a stretch of cheap quarterback play to be able to pair with like great offensive line play and invest a bunch in the defense and hopefully have like all the stars align at the right time to win another Super Bowl. Like that's obviously what happened in those 2 years that they went to the Super Bowl consecutively, is you had this cheap quarterback and a historically good defense. And that makes it a lot easier to win to win playoff games, to make it to the playoffs, to win playoff games. Do you think so we just saw Dak Prescott get a 4-year, $240 million deal, $60 million annual average. Obviously, it's going to get spread all weird on the cap, and the Cowboys are like one of those teams that makes people say the cap is fake anyway. Like how they fit all these huge contracts under their cap is always a mystery to a degree. But $60 million for a quarterback is a lot of money for a quarterback. One, how high can we go? Like as a percentage of the cap, he's got to be like near 25% exactly. At least on the annual average. And that's pretty goddamn high. How high can we go? And then what the Seahawks seem to be doing, and I kind of think what the Falcons are doing, I've gotten into some arguments. I'm in a couple like group chats with data-minded guys, I would say, and we got in a lot of arguments about whether or not drafting Michael Penix was good or bad, which I want to talk to you about in a second, by the way. But they've managed to take like the Falcons have this quarterback who is coming off of an injury. He's a veteran. He could fall off, and they have this like obvious contingency plan. The Seahawks, to a lesser degree on both, like have a less exciting contingency plan and a less exciting starter in Geno and Sam Howell. But they're kind of doing the same thing where it's like they have about like around $30 million devoted to the quarterback position across two guys. And are we going to start seeing teams, instead of investing $60 million in one guy, and then if that guy goes down, it's like a single point of failure, your season's over? Like the Packers were looking at Jordan Love. If he would have been injured worse, you punt this Packers season and move on to the next season, where if Kirk Cousins tears his Achilles again, you at least have somebody behind him. If Geno Smith if the Seahawks lose Geno Smith for a year, Sam Howell could come in and be like a guy that wins. How do you think that the way that we see teams like devoting money to the quarterback position is going to change, or will it change? Are we just going to keep seeing those guys take up more of the cap?
Well, I think there's two things that argue for teams to continue to do what they're doing, and you'll continue to see, deals like what Dak got. And the first, well, there's three things actually. The first thing that happens is the next contract is always the next bigger number, right? So It's not, are you the best quarterback? You're just the next up to get paid. So you're going to get the next number. And so that is always going to continue to happen. And then the other part of it is because that's what teams have to do to sign their quarterback. They got to have to pay at least 20% of the cap. You want to sign a guy for 3, 4, 5 years. And then what you do is you amortize the big signing bonus. And then each year you convert whatever the P5 is for that year into another bonus, amortize again, maybe add void years, basically amortizing it over added years. And so you just keep kicking the can down the road. That's why people say the cap is fake. It's not fake. Every dollar eventually comes due, but you can continue to push that reckoning, into the future. And hopefully your window is such that, you win a Super Bowl before you have to take that reset year. And that's the other part of it. You try, if you're smart about it and you are going to conduct yourself this way, you want to get all that on the books mostly in 1 year. You reset. It's not like you're tanking. You just reset that year. And if you're also smart and you're drafting quarterbacks, you'll have a cheap one waiting in the wings. I actually like what Seattle's doing with Howell. I think Howell was an underrated prospect. I think, and he's super cheap. So that's a great way to go about it. But will there be more teams having cheap quarterbacks that aren't high draft picks? I don't believe so. There's just too much push to draft the guy, get rid of the guy if he isn't the guy. I like what we saw with Fields. Just get him off the team, like we saw before that in Arizona. I mean, if you look back, I think it was the 2021 draft. I think T-Law is the only guy who didn't get traded. Mac Jones got traded. Fields got traded. Trey Lance got traded. Zach Wilson got traded. And funnily enough, out of those four quarterbacks, I think Trey Lance, the 49ers got the most back. I think they got a contingent fourth, or maybe it was just straight up fourth from Dallas. And the rest of them were like sixths and sevenths. It was piss poor, just setting draft capital on fire. But you got to take your shots at quarterback. And I think that's going to continue to happen rather than guys going the Baker Mayfield, Jacoby Brissett, Gardner Minshew, O'Connell route like the Raiders are doing. I think most teams are going to take their shots on quarterback. Unfortunately, not keep drafting, not keep going forward with a contingency plan like you mentioned, like Atlanta did. Instead, what they're going to do is they're going to bank on that guy hitting and then build out the rest of their team immediately and spend all their money. And I think that's why the edge is going to remain for smart teams who can be a little more disciplined in how they build.
Yeah, that's what I would like to see from the Seahawks or whoever, because you're right about the thing. It's always hard to explain to people. You're like, this guy signed the record-setting. Is Dak Prescott the best quarterback in the NFL? Obviously, no. Nobody thinks that but it's not really a question of is he or is he not the best. It's a question of how much better is he than the next guy that's available? And significantly better, I think, is the answer, as much as you may or may not think. Actually, what is your opinion on Dak Prescott?
I don't think he's worth what he got. I don't think Jordan Love's worth what he got, but I'm happy they got the bag. Would I have signed Dak for that number? No. But I also would have had a young quarterback waiting in the wings because I would have been drafting him. Sure. Jerry Jones did not do that, and so he wasn't in the position to make that decision. And he had to figure out if Trey Lance was going to be the guy. And I was in Dallas for that third preseason game, and I watched him throw for, I think, 3 touchdowns, he threw for 300 yards, and he threw 5 picks. I mean, that's not going to play. That won't play in the NFL. And so, if they were banking on developing him, that didn't quite work out. If they thought he would come up right when they had to make a decision on Dak, if they thought that those two things would coincide and time that up, that just didn't work. And the answer my question. No, I wouldn't have done it, except I have to couch it with if I was stuck in Jerry Jones' position, I hadn't done any of that, the things I said, you're kind of, I don't know. That makes it much harder. It's kind of like what the Bengals are doing with Jamar Chase. Like, if they had never done an early deal, an early extension with Joe Burrow, they could have stuck to their guns and said to him, hey, we didn't even extend the quarterback early. Get on the field, play. We'll make you the highest paid receiver after 4. We'll do it. You're going to be our guy, but we need you to play on your contract for the 3rd year so we can build this team up and get in that Super Bowl again. And then you could say that with credibility, but they paid Burrow. And so, and Chase going, I want to get paid too. Come on. Look what the 49ers are doing. Look what all these other teams are doing. And look, Jeff, he got paid. Why don't I get to get paid? And it looks like they're going to hold the line. But I don't know how happy Chase is, and I don't know how sick he actually was. Like,
Sure.
is he on the field giving his all? I don't know. And then you lose game one. So anyway, long-winded way of kind of answering this quarterback question. I just think it's a really hard problem, and there's a lot of ways to fuck it up, and NFL GMs seem to find creative ways to do just that.
Yeah, I always would hear people say that it's like they're like it's not worth a third round pick if that guy's not going to start, because the expectation is that your third round pick is like going to be playing a lot of snaps the first year, and I'm like, if the quarterback position is worth 20 to 25% of your cap, his backup is worth a third round pick, and having a guy when that guy leaves at some point or loses skill, especially, by the way, another thing about the NFL right now that I don't know if everyone's, I'm sure you're aware of this, but maybe not everybody's noticing. We take for granted because Tom Brady played till he was 45, and Aaron Rodgers is playing in his 40s, and Drew Brees played, I think, into his 40s. The next oldest quarterback, I think, is Matt Stafford at 36, and the quarterback position feels like it's getting younger overall, or at least the ends of careers seem to be happening earlier, and the ends of guys like Russell Wilson and Cam Newton and these guys that make a lot of their production with their legs, those guys especially seem to be their careers are ending earlier, or at least the time that they're like a top value starter is ending earlier. And yeah, if that's the case, then to me, I'm absolutely with you. Like, draft guys every year, draft 6th, 7th round for sure. But like, also, if the right guy's there, and that's what I said about Michael Penix in this argument, it's like you basically have the opportunity. It's a hedge, no doubt. But in 2 years, if Kirk Cousins is not effective, or if you think Michael Penix is better, and even if you can't trade Kirk Cousins, because I think he has a no trade clause, you get like a $26 million cap hit on a quarterback for the 2 years that follow and a chance to extend him, which is a different situation than giving Dak Prescott $60 million a year. You know what I mean? Like, it's crazy to imagine that a $25 million cap hit at the quarterback position is a huge discount in 2024, but it is. That is like a pretty big discount to have a top quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah, it's massive. And like, or Tennessee Titans, right? They saw Levis dropping and they took him at the top of the second. And I think that, that was sharp. They didn't necessarily need to go quarterback there. They probably didn't really want to, but they did. And so I'm actually saying draft him every chance you get. Like,
Sure.
You spend a first. There's nothing more important to a team than the quarterback. And there's no better way to spend your capital. Like, what are you going to do? You're going to get a running back? Like, look at San Francisco. Look what they did last night with an undrafted free agent in a good scheme behind a basically shit line, except for the left tackle. Trent Williams is all world, but the rest of them they're kind of ramshackle. Yeah. They're kind of ramshackle. And that guy, he was running like a mad dog. Like, he was just breaking tackles. You could see he was into it, fresh legs, all that stuff. But they found this guy last year, basically off the street. Everyone had a shot at that guy multiple times. It's not like and I think, and it's not to say he's not good. It's just say there's a lot of talent at running back, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of guys who can get it done. And it's the same thing with inside linebacker, off ball linebacker. You can find those guys. I think in LA, they found Omar Spates off UDFA. And I think, he made, Les Snead said he was going to be on the 48 before they even made cuts. I think that emboldened them to trade EJ Jones to Tennessee. I think it was. Yeah, it was Tennessee. And you didn't get much for him, but he was their starting middle linebacker. He played like 95% of the snaps last year. And there's Ole, out he goes. Guards are easy to get. I think centers are a little tougher to find a good one, especially if you have a young QB. You want someone who can make line calls. But anyway, I'm going through all this just to say, if you're okay, so if you don't need a quarterback, but there's no edges, no great wide receivers, and no great cornerbacks on the board, just take the quarterback. Just even if it's your first, even if it's a first round pick.
Yeah, I'm in agreement, and I think that teams got to stop maybe the way that they do it, instead of my like spread $40 million among two guys. Strategy is to just stop allowing quarterbacks, like pretending like if a quarterback sees another quarterback, it's like two beta fish, and they're gonna, like, if a guy is being pushed in practice, or if they're like, I don't view that all as all bad, and like pretending like these guys are the governor of the state when they get signed is very annoying. I know that you're like, maybe your specialty. I'm not discounting what you have to say about quarterbacks, but I think your specialty is probably receivers. The Seahawks today restructured DK Metcalf. I think that, and you can actually correct me on this if I'm wrong, I believe this is one of those restructures that's just like, it's built into the contract that they can just restructure him. He doesn't get any less money. In fact, it probably incentivizes them to keep him longer because they're pushing the prorated bonus out. In fact, they added a bunch of voidable years to do the thing you were talking about. And I think that this kind of thing actually points to them being more likely to keep DK and not trade him and probably extend him, right? Because they've now pushed this investment in him further and further back. It's less advantageous to get rid of him for them from a financial perspective at the minimum. But there's also, we're kind of in this time with receivers. I was a big, I would say I understand baseball analytics significantly better than football analytics. And there was this era of catcher pitch framing that was like, the Molina brothers were like these hidden gems, like these dudes that couldn't hit it all, but they could frame pitches because nobody could frame pitches, and they were worth 40 runs a year or 80 runs, some like gaudy amount of runs per year because they were so amazing. And then kind of everyone learned how to frame pitches, and now it's like not something that gets valued that much anymore because a guy like Cal Raleigh, who plays for the Mariners, first baseman's body, but can frame pitches as well as anybody in the league, pretty much. Everyone figured it out. And it kind of feels like maybe with the quarterback position, I think we've certainly seen it with like the inside linebacker positions have become devalued. Running backs as a whole are devalued because what they need to know and how they need to be coached up to be a quality running back in the NFL with like whatever the minimum athleticism is to be in the NFL. I'm not saying you or I could go run for 1,400 yards, but like there's 1,000 guys with the minimum athleticism to be in the NFL as a running back. And you could coach those guys up to be running backs pretty easily. And it feels like we're kind of headed down that way with receivers. Either that or the talent at receiver is just so deep year over year that it feels like not paying receivers might actually be, and I guess you keep allocating that money to your elite quarterback. I don't know what you do with it. Ultimately, it's got to go to somebody, and I don't want the owner to just pocket it. So that's not what I'm advocating for. But it kind of feels like the receiver position is something they don't need to be devoting $60 million a year to or $30 million a year to. And yet, we see CeeDee Lamb got what he got. We saw Brandon Ayuk get, I know you have a Frisco Josh in the name. I don't know if you have feelings on Brandon Ayuk. I would say that probably DK falls between those guys in terms of production and value. But like you said also, it doesn't matter where he's at. He's going to be an impending free agent and have a lot of leverage. One, is DK Metcalf good? This should be just like a trivia game. Is this guy good? And you answer that. Also, what do you think about what the Seahawks will have to pay him and what that looks like for teams in the future?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. Everything in the NFL is like last year, maybe the year before. And then they're projecting you forward for at most 2 years, and most contracts only there are longer contracts, don't get me wrong, but from the point of view of for cap balancing and for just how much your real commitment is to a player, often it is only 2 years out. And even if he was really good and you got a good team friendly deal, he's going to want to restructure if you overperformed right after 2 years. So everything's 2 years out. So I don't really blame the Seahawks here. My understanding here is they created almost $10 million in cap. I'm just looking at the details here, and it's 3 void years. But then to next year, the cap number for DK is going to be almost $32 million. That's kind of rough. But it's not to say he's not worth it, and I'm not sure that next year they can't kick the can again. We'll see what happens, and that would probably be a question for Jason at Over the Cap. Who has actually access to these contracts. That's one thing.
How does he feel about stand-up comedy?
There you go. You need to get him on here. I'll recommend.
All right.
But yeah, no, I mean, it's tough for a layperson who doesn't actually have these documents and can actually dig into the contracts to actually make an informed kind of opinion about some of these moves. I wouldn't kick cans like this unless I was really sure I had the guy. And it'd be the same thing. It's the same thing with Ayuk. I wouldn't have extended if I wasn't sure he's the guy, because you're going to be paying the next number or close to top 5, right? And are you sure Ayuk's the guy? Like, he had one elite season, and before that he was just kind of meh. And so he's a guy I would have traded or let walk. And the next year, it sounds like he probably would have tried to sit out, or he would have come around like Jamar Chase and given a half-assed effort. But again, and then here's another thing: if you look at the game last night, Ayuk dropped a sure touchdown, right? That's what he was that's what he was holding out. You pay me and I'll make this play. Didn't make the play. It's a small sample, all the rest, but that's how the NFL is. You got to show out. You just got paid, but
the optics are bad.
Yeah, he wasn't getting separation because his pockets were too heavy. It was nasty.
Yeah, so I guess to that point, is DK that good? Is DK that?
Well, I said I wouldn't pay him. I probably wouldn't. Pay him.
I thought you meant you wouldn't pay. Yeah,
unless Seattle thinks he's that guy.
I got you. Okay, I thought you meant Ayuk, but yeah, I get what you're saying.
Got you. No, so the last 2 years. So last year, DK just wasn't what he was the previous 2.
Sure.
And so the question is, moving forward in the next 2 years, what do you think of him? And they got JSN, and they got Lockett's getting a little old, isn't he? Is he pushing 30 now?
I think he's 33 or something like that. Amazingly at his size. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you got JSN, you're hoping he's going to be a guy. They've been bringing him along slowly, and they got Chardonnay, and I don't know who else in terms of weapons they have. They kind of messing around with their tight end. They tried Noah Fant, and now it's the George Fant too.
Oh yeah, they have George Fant has made his return. He's as a tackle, and he actually got injured in last game, but they extended or re-signed Noah Fant in the offseason. So by the way, starter money. I think it was like 2 years, 20 million, or 2 years, 18 million, something like that. And to Lockett is 32 at the end of this month. So
32.
That's super old, especially for a receiver of his stature, right? Like Mike Evans might be able to play till he's 50. Tyler Lockett is not going to be able to play till he's 50. I'm confident about that.
So that's interesting. Analytics seems to show that the bigger wide receivers have shorter careers, like Calvin Johnson and things like that. So it's actually Evans is kind of a weird one. Like it's these smaller guys who get down, who don't take the big hits, that can have the longer careers.
Calvin Johnson wasn't no longer productive though, right?
He's just too hurt. He said, my body couldn't take
that's interesting. I will say about DK in that regard, because he's obviously one of these bigger guys. He'll deliver some hits and stuff like that, but he does not go over the middle to catch balls the same way that Mike Evans does. In fact, when you look at those heat maps of DK Metcalf, and this is the thing that makes me the most skeptical of him as a guy that you're going to pay as a top 5 receiver, and you look at where he catches balls, and it's pretty much like a right angle of the 2 places he catches balls, right? It's like directly in front of the line of scrimmage when he's coming across the front, but not like a slant across the middle, and directly out in front of him where he's just running very fast and stopping, or running very fast and not stopping. Like, this is where he's catching balls. And I don't know if that guy, when he's not running 4.3, is going to be able to continue to be a productive receiver in the NFL.
Yeah, he was never really known as an elite route runner, was he? And there was always I remember he kind of proved the doubters wrong, who would always bring up his agility score, and like his 3-cone. That didn't really turn out to be important at all for what he did. He was just big, strong, and fast, and those will win in the NFL as long as you're big enough, strong enough, and fast enough. So you have to be
on like the far poles of all athleticism otherwise, and then you can be like a pretty good receiver in the NFL. But he's got like 60% of the measurements you would care about on Calvin Johnson. He's on Calvin Johnson's level, and then he's like not the freak and not the technician that Calvin Johnson was as a receiver, right?
Yeah, he was the entire package, one of the best receivers we've ever seen. I mean, not at Jerry Rice level, but just very, very good. And so I guess again, it's one of those things where you want to build a team for the long haul. Do you want to be giving a guy you're not sure of top 5 money moving forward? And I think I would side on maybe trade him if I could. Maybe this year would be a good year to do it. Try and get some picks in return, and then get another wide receiver who is cheap. You can kind of see what they're doing at the Chargers right now. They traded away Keenan Allen, who is on the wrong side of 30, and they kept their edge rushers, and they're trying to build up their wide receiving core from there. They got McConkey, and who is a smaller player who plays out of the slot mainly, very shifty, and they're trying to rehabilitate Quentin Johnson. We'll see how that goes. But you don't necessarily have to have elite wide receivers as long as they can do one thing that is elite, right? So McConkey is super shifty, and he's going to be great in the slot. You can see it on his touchdown on Sunday. He made two guys miss with kind of a whoop, both times, and then made it into the end zone to kind of seal the win for them. And so you can win with that. And it's funny because Georgia replaced McConkey with a guy that's just doppelganger. It's just basically the same dude, and he's scoring touchdowns and racking up tons of yards, a slim white dude in the slot. So it's like, I think as long as you're building a team with a type at each position, you don't necessarily have to have a Jamar Chase or a Justin Jefferson. Now, that said, I would pay those guys. I just don't think that DK is the guy that I would pay the next number to.
Yeah, and I guess to put a bow on it, the problem with trading DK after this year and why this restructure kind of hurts that is if you trade him in this offseason, $21 million dead cap hit. So it's tough. Okay, well, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I appreciate you coming on, Josh Hermsmeyer of airyards.com, of airyards.substack.com. Is that the correct URL?
Yeah, that's where you go if you play DFS or gamble or anything like that. I have Air Yards Buy Low on there. Had been doing it for the past.
That's the best reason to live in Idaho, is to be able to gamble online.
I can't. There's no gambling online in Idaho.
You can't do DFS in Idaho?
Can't do DFS, and I can't do sportsbook. I gotta drive into Washington, go up to the Indian casino to place any bets. It's pretty rough.
Wow.
And then my son is in California, so I can actually have him as my meat puppet do DFS for me. But bro, it's rough.
I know
out here in these streets.
It's a Class C felony in Washington State. It's ridiculous to do any online gambling. It's ridiculous unless you're doing it through the tribe on the tribal casino grounds. It's crazy. Yeah. All right, well, come see me do comedy. By the way, not you also, but like to the folks out there listening or watching this. At what's my next? Oh, I'll be in Wisconsin at headlining Skyline Comedy Club. What is it? September 26th, and then opening for Chris Franjola the rest of the weekend. All right. Thank you, Josh. I appreciate you. And I'm going to play the outro. So again, I don't have to edit.